Okay, let's get started as we kind of wait for a couple more people to trickle in. So, hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming to today's event. It's called Grow Your Career in the New Energy Future with YP Link. So, my name is Katie Smith-Parent. I lead business development for industry diversification at Spartan Controls. And I'm also the executive director of Young Women in Energy, which is one of the organizations that's associated with YP Link, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second. I want to start off today with a land acknowledgement. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that tonight's event is held on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes on the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We thank all who continue to move forward on reconciliation, both professionally and personally. And I hope you all join me on my journey to finally start and finish that Indigenous Canada MOOC hosted by the University of Alberta that I've been saying I will do for the next year, for the last year. So a little bit about YP Link. YP Link was formed a couple years ago as a way for 5 young professional organizations to come together and work more closely to ensure our events didn't compete with one another, to collaborate and co-promote programs and events, to further network amongst each of the groups, share resources, and ultimately align on the future of energy and the role emerging leaders play in the future of the energy industry. Now, that in mind, the 5 organizations are Young Professionals in Energy, Young Women in Energy, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Young Professionals, World Petroleum Council Future Leaders, and the Young Energy Infrastructure Professionals. So I'm hoping that all of you are members of one of those organizations, and then that might be where you heard about the event tonight. We have worked for the last couple of years to co-brand one event per year. Our first was a virtual event in November 2020, where we talked about energy transformation, where more than 300 young professionals signed on online for a speaker blitz. We had people speaking on Indigenous relations and reconciliation, carbon capture, hydrogen, bitumen beyond combustion, diversity, long-term storage, nature-based climate solutions, small modular nuclear reactors, and the like. And unfortunately, having skipped 2021 due to the ongoing, what I will call the great pause, we're now back. And this is a focus on a significant issue that's currently pressing the energy industry, obviously talent attraction, recruitment, and advancement. And we're really looking forward to today's event. So I'll take the next few moments to thank our sponsors and partners, provide some housekeeping instructions, and then I'll explain how today will go. So we want to thank a number of people for their support today. So number one, a huge thank you to Pat Huffnagel-Smith and Cheryl Knight from Talent Needs for the Evolving Energy Ecosystem for their commitment to this event with many, many meetings and sharing their expertise in labor market research, which you'll hear more about shortly. Thank you to the Government of Alberta and the Government of Canada for their support of Pat and Cheryl's work, and therefore how we were able to host this event tonight completely free of charge. Thank you to Pat's company, Creative Links, for supplying the drinks tonight. So please, afterwards, make sure that you pour yourself something. And thank you to Innovate Calgary and the Energy Transition Center for allowing us to host this event in this incredible space. YP's ability to have space in the Energy Transition Center is thanks to the Clean Resource Innovation Network, CRIN, as part of our CRIN YP Sector Engagement Plan, which we are utmostly thankful because we get to participate in such an incredible ecosystem. Thank you to Avatar Innovations for their continued support of the YP Link and associated groups. Make sure to watch out for some big news from them via press release tomorrow morning. Kevin refuses to tell us what it is, so you'll find out at 10 a.m. And further details will be shared about, they have a networking mixer here tomorrow night as well. So just ongoing thank you to CRIN for their support. And they've provided the posters that you'll see at the back, which are ultimately an extension of some of the research that Cheryl's going to share in a second. And we also appreciate Careers in Energy, who are going to be right over there afterwards. Thank you for waving over there. And we actually get to share their virtual reality experience, if you've ever seen that. And then thank you so much to Jared Smith, who's here taking photos tonight. So everyone give him a wave. He's right there. And now I'm going to hand it off. So here's how this is going to go. I'm going to hand it off to Nan, who I'll explain in a second. She's going to do a little bit of a CRIN 101. We're going to then hand it off to Cheryl, who's then going to hand it off to Josh, who's then going to bring up the panelists, and then we're going to bring Jody up. So there's going to be a couple of people you're going to hear from tonight, but hopefully you really find this very valuable from all aspects of this event. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Nan. So Nan Ho-Covernton is a sustainability leader and luckily my coworker at Spartan Controls. She's also the digital oil and gas CRIN co-lead for their committee, and she will do a CRIN 101 before we'll have Cheryl come up to do the CleanTech careers presentation.
Thank you very much, Katie. So for those of you in the crowd who I've not met yet tonight at the front door, not only do I check you in, but I get to do some other things in the ecosystem. So as Katie mentioned, I work at Spartan Controls. I'm the sustainability leader, so relatively new role for me, but I've been with the company for about 28 years. And so it's my pleasure to kick this off on behalf of Clean Resource Innovation Network. So because you've been in this room and you see the posters, you cannot say you've never heard of CRIN before. Can I say that? Has everybody heard of CRIN? Who hasn't heard of CRIN? Okay, so I work on a commission basis. So I'd like you all to become members of CRIN before you leave. Over there, you'll find a postcard and a business card so that you can easily become a member and a commission basis because it's $0. So it's just a social contract that you have to sign to become a member, but then you're connected with like 3,500 other people that are already signed up. So which is really cool. And you can access any one of the 3,500, including me. So benefit to you or not, I don't know. That's up to you. But I'd like to give you a quick overview of CRIN. And so what you see behind me, I guess I should move over, is kind of the way my brain works sometimes. So I think of it as synapses or a neural network, but that's for you, your benefit, Hayden. Hayden's with Synovus and the digital side of things. Anyway, so this map represents the different sectors that CRIN is involved with. So there's 19 different sectors with 7 different themes. And so in 2019, CRIN was formed. Well, actually a little bit earlier than that, but CRIN was formed. And the vision of CRIN is to be Canada's global leader in clean hydrocarbons from source to end use. And in 2019, it was given a funding or provided funding by the federal government of $100 million to advance technology in clean tech. So $80 million was awarded earlier not earlier this year. That was last year already. Man, time flies, right, Ian? So $80 million, 50 of which went to reducing environmental footprint, 25 to low emissions fuels and products, and 5 million to digital oil and gas, which is the group that I looked after, along with my colleague, Heather Herring. And so you're thinking, 80 million, that doesn't add up to 100. Well, there's another $20 million for the ecosystem development. So there's a bit of work happening there now to help reduce barriers and address industry pull. And so one of the things that we've worked on too, which was released and shared at COP27, is an ecosystem map. And so in it, if anybody's ever worked in the ecosystem, it's hard to navigate. I know that, and continuously talking to different people, but we've tried to help simplify things by having this map that you can now navigate. You do have to become a member in order to access it, though. Again, I work on a commission basis. And then the other things that we've done too recently from an ecosystem standpoint is build out an innovation showcase with our partner PTAC so that any of the new technologies are actually hosted on that site. So in this giant map, you'll see the 7 themes that we're looking at or focused on: cleaner fuels, digital oil and gas, low emissions value-added products. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? Like hydrogen, bitumen beyond combustion, novel hydrocarbon extraction, novel land and well site remediation, anything methane related, and then water technology. So this is the network of networks. And those of you in the CRIN, sorry. One of the things that we're actually focused on is the YP sector, and Kevin Crosart actually leads that YP piece on behalf of CRIN, and that there's an engagement plan that we have to include all of you to help move us further forward in the clean tech space. So thank you very much. Welcome, everyone.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Cheryl Knight. I'm an independent consultant, and with my colleague, Pat Huffnagel-Smith, who bought the wine and the food, and she's running around dealing with wine and food. So when she comes in, we're going to get her to give us a wave. So we are part of an organization that we formed together. We have our own companies, but we call it an organization called Talent Needs for the Evolving Energy Ecosystem. So this presentation is part of a series of events and workshops that are aimed at increasing the capacity of the energy workforce to transition to sectors and occupations within the broader energy ecosystem. And this work is funded by the Government of Alberta in partnership with the Government of Canada. And as a part of your registration, you have no choice. You're going to be part of our newsletter group. So expect to hear from us. And of course, you can unsubscribe. So this presentation leverages research that Pat and I have done for more years than I care to mention, on transferable skills in oil and gas, from oil and gas to oil and gas. You know, it's all changed, but it also leverages work that we did last year for CRIN, the Clean Resource Innovation Network, on the skills and occupations needed for CleanTech. I see what you did. These YPs are too quick for me. Okay. So key messages. There are 3 key messages that I'd like to impart. First and foremost, there are tremendous opportunities to continue and build a resilient career in energy. And the basis for that is transferable skills and understanding what skills you have and which are transferable throughout the energy ecosystem. Secondly, the core occupations to decarbonize oil and gas are already found in the industry. That's great news. So the skills that the oil and gas industry is known for can be and are being leveraged for clean tech development without the need to pursue a new degree. So this is all about upskilling. The innovation ecosystem is made up of a broadening range of employers that are collaborating and changing how work is done, much differently than the old oil and gas industry that me and nobody else in this room was a part of. So the skills needed for this broadened energy ecosystem go well beyond technical skills to include important universal attributes or soft skills, which I will share. So the products of the work that we did for CRIN are a part of this presentation. And we did this work to mitigate the risks associated with talent attraction for clean tech in oil and gas. For us, talent attraction rests on an understanding of the available career opportunities and the career pathways. So we're really good at developing technology and talking about the technology, but believe it or not, Pat and I, it was like pulling teeth to have people explain to us for those technologies, what are the skills and occupations that are needed. And that represents the brunt of the work. So the career products are available on CRIN's website. And as Nan explained, and there is a quiz right now, there's a career product for the clean tech innovation ecosystem, and one for each of the technology themes. Quick, name one. No. Okay, so that will be a good reason for you to look at the posters at the back, and there's a QR code that will take you to CRIN's website. But more importantly, take a look at those career products, because it will tell you about the definitions of each technology. So you don't have to know the names, but let's understand what the technologies are, why you might join that career. What are the universal attributes that are required? And there is a really nice poster in the back about those universal attributes, and I'm going to show them to you. What are the phases of development for each technology theme? So there's a development, there's a phase for each technology, or there's a value chain. And throughout that value chain, there's different skills needed and different occupations required. You'll find all of that in the career products, as well as the key skills throughout. So as I mentioned, the posters were prepared by CRIN, and I hope you'll look at the posters at the back and then download the QR code, or whatever you do with QR codes. these are the 4 key job families that we heard from employers are where occupations and skills are required. And these are required to innovate and for the application of CleanTech to improve the environmental performance of oil and gas. So this is also a poster at the back. So if you look at the job families, and if you were able to read the job titles, don't worry about it because it's all available. You'll see that these are occupations that are already in oil and gas. And when you registered, you were asked to identify which job family you were in, aspire to be in, or associate yourself with. And you're all here. So the technical job family is orange on your name tag, and that's 35% of you. The business job family is blue, and that is 37% of you. The leadership job family is pink, and that is 23% of you. And the entrepreneurial job family is 6%, and that is red. You've already heard this message, but it's important, so I'm going to repeat it. Your oil and gas skills, regardless of the career path that you're in, are foundational to the more diverse energy system. What the energy industry is known for is summarized on this slide. I don't think I'm going to read it all because those of you with oil and gas experience know what those skills are, but it's important as you advance in your career or you look for employment like some of you are, to reinforce those skills that the oil and gas industry is known for. In order to remain resilient and marketable, you need to, of course, monitor the changes going on in the environment. You may need to take short courses or micro skill, take on growth assignments, and then lastly, understand the transferability of your skills, what you have and what's required as to where you're going to. The employment in the energy innovation system relies very heavily on innovation and collaboration from a variety of contributors that support technology development and employment, so that this ecosystem is a signal or information on who is hiring. It's not simply the owners of the asset, the E&P companies. So regardless of who's hiring across the ecosystem, talent is increasingly cited as a key challenge. The interesting thing about evolving sectors or an evolving ecosystem is there are no fit-for-purpose skills for a new industry. So these skill sets are not readily available in the market. The employers know that. They know that they need to rely on the skills available in oil and gas, and that these skills will be upgraded by you or by an employer. This slide here is also a poster because it's really beautiful and has a lot of words on it. Really depicts that the sustainability lens is changing the skills that are needed, but also the approach to work. So the pace of change to achieve net zero by 2050 requires far more collaboration and different companies working together in the ecosystem to innovate. So this slide comes from what employers told us are the skills that are needed for a future fit mindset. So all of the skills on this slide are what we call universal attributes, or some people call them soft skills. These complement technical skills, and we're advised they're as valuable, if not more valuable. So please, in the networking part, please take a minute to take a read through it, or of course, go to CRIN's website. So on that, I'd like to close and hope that you'll follow Pat and I on LinkedIn. We have personal LinkedIn pages, but also talent needs for the evolving energy ecosystem. You can learn more about how to assess your transferability. We haven't shared that because that gets into a fair amount of technical detail. But if you are looking to advance your career, it's very important to be able to look at transferability and to be very thoughtful about the criteria that makes transferability successful. So we can talk about that after, but you'll hear more about that through our newsletter, which you're all signed up for. Additional resources, of course, the Clean Resource Innovation Network, who has made these posters possible. Careers in Energy, which is Petro LMI. They have a great website that Pat and I were also content developers for, and our transferability of skills methodology was used in that website. And of course, as mentioned, you can take the VR tour. And then lastly, if you're interested specifically in the skills for hydrogen or CCS, then you can go to the Transition Accelerator. And now, without further ado, we get to the really great part of this event. I'm going to pass you on to Josh. He's not the really great part, sorry. Oh, is he? Oh, I'm sorry. My note said he was. But Josh, the panel's the really great part.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to take this opportunity, one, to thank everyone for coming out tonight. So for the next part, we're going to go into our panel session. The key part of this discussion is kind of putting the real world application to these slides and getting our corporate leaders to speak what they're doing in industry. And then just for that discussion, we'll have the panel discuss for about 30 to 45 minutes. Then we'll open up to Q&A from the floor. So if you do have any questions, just hold that to the end, and then we'll take those at the end. So I'd like to introduce our panel and get them to come sit up at the front here. So first up, we have Janet Annesley. I did get it right. The Chief Sustainability Officer at Kiwetinohk Energy Corp. Next, we have Kevin Krausert, CEO and co-founder of Avatar Innovations. Candace, who is the Vice President of Human Resources and Real Estate with LNG Canada. And Ashley Fernandes, the VP of Drilling Optimization and Technology at Precision Drilling. So thank you so much for making it out this evening. I'm going to jump right into the questions here, being cognizant of everyone's time. So the first question I wanted to open up, kind of building on to that early presentation and the trends we're seeing in industry, is how you guys feel the energy transition and the demand for decarbonization is impacting the operations of your organization. And I know we have the 2 mics there, but feel free, you can share mine and jump in as you guys see fit here. Not all at once.
That's a big question. How it's impacting the operations
Yes.
I think it's omnipresent in the operations of our organization. Everything from finance and the way that we look at the viability of existing and future projects. Cheryl talked very eloquently about the human resources challenges and the talent needs, regulatory expectations of all of our stakeholders, plus Indigenous communities where we work. And, Kiwetinohk is a energy transition company. So every single day we're looking at how are we going to use the resources that we have today and transition to really that net zero future. We're an oil and gas company at present. We produce primarily natural gas liquids, but we're morphing ourselves into a utility. We currently have about 2 gigawatts of electricity projects before the Alberta regulator, about 1 gigawatt of solar projects, and then another gigawatt of natural gas fired projects. And we were awarded 2 CCUS hubs. So really, I think in that, everything we do is just, every day is looking at the decarbonization challenge and how we as a business can actually turn that into a profitable commercial enterprise. Because really, to be sustainable, you do need to be profitable, maybe not every day, but certainly over the longer term. And likewise, to be profitable, you have to be sustainable. So that's the way we look at it.
Just because I have the mic, I'll stuck on next. It strongly features in, and if it doesn't already feature in everything that your company is talking about, it should. And for LNG Canada, it's part of our license to operate. It's about investment in Canada. It's about doing things responsibly. So LNG Canada, for those of you who don't know, it's we're building I think we were one of the, if I flash back to 2016, that's a little while ago. But I think there was about 32 projects that were on the books, and with about 128 billion. Please don't quote me on all those numbers. That were, ours to win in Canada. I think we might have been one of the last projects standing, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of different, there's complexity in that too. But one of the things with LNG Canada is that we focused on is building the relationships, building the capacity in country, but then also looking at how we're going to leverage what Canada brings, which is clean energy solutions, to the world. And so once we're up and running, I'm only allowed to say in the middle of the decade. But once we're up and running, we will be delivering LNG to Asian markets. That will so the reduction in GHG emissions will be the equivalent of taking about 80% of the cars off the road in Canada. So if you think about that, and so what we play against is kind of looking at it from a global perspective to say what is the right thing in service of the world, and how we're actually collectively in this together, versus how we look at in unique project investment in Canada. But yeah, it's core in what we do. It makes my job really, really cool, and I love talking about how we have an impact on blue skies. So this was December. I'm taking my time machine back a little bit today. 2019, December 2019, when I was in China. So we have 3 different module yards in China, and it was really impactful because you think about what we do in one part of the world and what an incredible impact it can have on the other part. So they are just looking to have clean or blue skies. Can we see blue skies? And so for me, as like, I'm a parent, I breathe air, we all do, what the difference that could make. And then fast forward a month later in January, when we were evacuating people out of China, given the pandemic hit there first, but I won't go into all of that in terms of impact of project. But I think overall, I think we've got a lot to be proud of in Canada. I know that doesn't, we talk about oil and gas and some of the legacy views on where we've been, but there's so much to be gained in really focusing on this transition.
So Precision Drilling is a rig contractor who drills wells for operators in Canada, North America, Middle East. Today we have around 135 rigs working. And if I ask anybody in the audience, how much do you think a rig, if you've seen a rig, for people who've seen a rig, how much do you think a rig emits a day in tonnage or a year in tonnage of greenhouse gases? A number, no idea. 130 rigs today puts out 600,000 tons of greenhouse gases in a year. That's a lot. So we forced it on ourselves to reduce this number. So our net zero our reduction came from ourselves in saying we need to make our rigs cleaner and greener. And so when we started this initiative and we went to the operators with it in Canada and in the US, we got a lot of interest in Canada purely because of carbon taxes. Oh, we're paying carbon tax. If you can help us reduce that, go ahead and do it. But I think the interest that we had grew in a form that says, if we want to advance this thing with oil and gas or the business in oil and gas, we need to then be sustainable by reducing it year on year on year. So we went out and we programmed ourselves to work on 3 big initiatives between now and 2027, which is to bring hybrid energy to the rigs, i.e. take away a diesel generator and install a battery. So we've gone into this whole scope of saying, instead of running 3 generators, we put out a battery there. And when there's not enough power to be utilized, a demand from the rig, the battery kicks in and does the job for you. The second area that we're actually working on is monitoring emissions. You know, all of us drive a car every day. None of us know what it gives out for emissions. We don't really care, do we? We fill the tank up, we emit, we leave. I think monitoring this emissions will then lead you to taking us as rig contractors to the next step. When one rig contractor starts something, the other one says, oh, I see he's doing a sustainable thing. Let's move into his space and try and compete. So I think it's a good thing when you start to monitor emissions. So the emissions we're monitoring is on all our exhaust stacks. We actually put sensors on them, monitor them, bring that data back, give it to the operators. We are seeing some good numbers, if you like, from a carbon tax perspective when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. And the third thing we're trying to do is we're trying to build carbon sequestration, or carbon collection, to take that in, give it to completions where they will reuse the carbon for acidizing wells or put them back down into orphan wells, right? So that's the 3 big areas between now and 2027. The company's invested somewhere around $20 million a year into the space. So it's a substantial amount of money that we're putting in from a rig contractor perspective, but we're very serious about it. We've started going back to the discussion they had on people, and we'll talk about it again. We've got a brand new group of engineers who've joined us now in this space. We never had a greenhouse gas or an emissions reduction group within Precision. We were a rig contractor. We dealt with dumb iron, rigs, and anything you wanted to do with drilling. But we're now a little bit better than that in this space. So we'll continue to reduce our emissions. I think we are on goal to reduce our emissions by 2030. But I think the amount of time investment, people required, is going to come to the forefront as we take on this challenge going forward, right?
Really interesting listening to your perspective from my previous career in drilling. It's amazing how much things have evolved in even 2 years since I was pretty actively involved in the drilling industry. For those who don't know, I used to run a oil and gas drilling company for about a decade, and in 2020 sort of pandemic price crash, one of the technology initiatives I was working on at the company, everyone was like, Kevin, you got to flesh this out. And one of those, co-conspirators was Janet Ainsley in her previous role at Husky, which really turned into what Avatar is now. So how does decarbonization impact the work I'm doing now? Kevin, run faster. Avatar, can you do more? In the 20 months since we've launched Avatar, we've received 1,700 applications to participate from industry professionals like yourselves. We've generated 644 alumni who've gone through the program in the past 2 years. We've had 67 oil and gas companies working in Avatar, which represent about 75% of Canadian upstream production and about 65% of Canadian mainline midstream assets. Generated 30 technologies sponsored by industry that have been invested in at some stage of commercialization, formed a partnership with Elon Musk's foundation, and have 2 technologies competing in as finalists for the $100 million Carbon Removal X Prize, and works in partnership with the University of Calgary to create this space. So, in short, the thesis that we're taking is that the energy transition is not just wind and solar. Wind and solar are fantastic. We need to scale them. They're great, but that's, in any realistic scenario, they're still represent electrification represents a maximum of about 50% of the energy supply mix by 2050. So what do we do with the other half of the emissions problem? The only rational solutions, and this is the IEA that's saying it's a 50%, electrification scenario by 2050. The only rational solutions for the other half of the emissions problem are things like carbon capture, hydrogen, long duration energy storage, renewable fuels. And those are the things that we're doing actually very well inside this industry. So the challenge is, a lot of these, frankly, don't meet the same economic returns as drilling a new well. or bringing a new pipeline looping project online. And then a lot of them need technology breakthroughs to be able to get there. The IEA says 50% of the technology required to get to a net zero 2050 doesn't yet exist. So we've got 7 years now, 7 years in a month till our 2030 targets. We just had a methane emissions reduction technology that TC has invested in that went from concept to commercial pilot in less than 12 months. Innovation in oil and gas has historically been measured in decades. If we wait that long, we're not going to have a shot at meeting the targets that we have. So the forum that we've created at Avatar is three-legged stool. The first is Avatar Ignite, which I see many alumni in the program. It's a 12-week program where you get a chance to work as a semi-autonomous, multifunctional team. And you'll get a technology stream area sponsored by a big corporate. And essentially, you're told, go. Here's a white sheet of paper, come up with a solution, and come and pitch it to executives. It gives chance individuals an understanding to build their skills and that transferability of taking their core competencies as a well pad engineer or a compressor station optimizer or what have you, and build those soft skills that, Pat and Cheryl were talking about adaptability, about resilience, and applying them in new ways. At the end of that 12 weeks, that's the second leg of the Avatar stool, which is historically being called Avatar Accelerator, but tomorrow at 10 a.m. will be known as Avatar Studios. And the teams get sponsored by a large cap. They get 8 hours a week of paid professional work time to go and build it through our partnerships with SAIT and the University of Calgary, go and prototype it. And then at the end of that 20-week journey, should it be successful, we'll flip the IP and the developed content into a NewCo, and you've got a customer in place, a prototype in place, clear IP, and it gets to market. And then we place some early stage investments behind those as well. But you got to keep the IP, you got to own it. The founders get to own it. So that was sort of the big breakthrough in innovation I think that Avatar brought to the ecosystem was once the corporates sort of realized that they didn't necessarily want the IP, they wanted access to the IP, all of a sudden we could stop fighting. And all of a sudden we could start figuring out what the innovations were, and you got to eat what you kill. So how is it impacting my work? It's I can't do a meeting without talking about, if I can get through 10 minutes in my workday without talking about decarbonization, feels like a vacation. But yeah, there's high level what we're up to, and we're opening up registrations tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. You guys kind of jumped ahead to my next question there of looking at what investments and technologies your organization was focused on, but maybe kind of building on some of the items you guys spoke about investments in like hybridizing your drilling rigs or with your work, especially with Avatar there. But I guess, was there maybe a particular project you guys wanted to highlight or something that's maybe a year or two out that you guys are working on, or maybe want to get there, maybe just elaborate on some of these investments you guys as companies are making? Nice, easy question.
I know. How many projects do you have to talk about, Kevin? So I'll just speak before he's going to list them alphabetically. But I think Kevin covered, when you were talking there, I was thinking, was Kevin been in our investor meetings? Like, was he somewhere or have a fly on the wall? I think you summarized the challenge well, because, investors they look at our upstream business, for example, that's doing really well right now. And they're like, well, why would you spend this money on, developing a bunch of electricity projects? And these are the same investors that say they have all this, concern about climate change. And so we're asking them challenging them to put their money where their mouth is. But we are working on everything from the upstream, looking at ways we can reduce methane. So the, traditional flaring, venting, pneumatics, and then electrification of our facilities, so that we can, electrify all our control systems, et cetera, looking at how we get more efficient with some of our heat and our combustion on site. So, whether or not we start doing cogeneration on site or other ideas, we're really, looking at absolutely everything we can and the emissions that's associated with it, because we do believe to be successful in the upstream industry that you do have to get your point to your basically, is everyone here, doing scope 1, 2, 3 emissions? You have to get to the point where you really have, little to few scope 1 emissions. And your scope 2, you better be minimizing that. And that's really where our business strategy goes next, is our scope 2 emissions. And finally, as we send clean electrons into the grid, really trying to attack the scope 3 emissions from our natural gas projects. And also, of course, solar has no scope 3 emissions. And CCS, one of the key challenges we see for the energy system, in Canada and particularly in Alberta, because we don't have the hydro wealth that, say, Quebec or BC has, is the ability to manage peaks in the electricity market, which means if you're going to have a natural gas peaker facility, you have to manage this intermittency. We're looking at 9 engines right now at some of our 2 project sites. And these engines would go from 0, not even idling, to full power in 4 minutes. So we need to have a capture technology that can also do that and can do it in a commercial manner. And, you talk about 7 years, we do have the requirement to be net zero by 2035. That's the government's new clean electricity framework. And you will literally, as proposed, if they actually go ahead with that, you will not be able to operate in 2035 if you're sort of above a very stringent performance standard. So we have really set the bar in Canada, and now it's the challenge of the technology funnel to get there and to drive the iteration so we can actually innovate and commercialize in one heck of a hurry.
So maybe I'll take the perspective of, we would love all of that electricity and the clean energy, because we're building technologies today that rely on the fact that we're going to be solving some of these issues. So LNG Canada today, as I sit here today, is the cleanest LNG plant in the world by design. We've cut our GHG emissions by about 35% relative to the next cleanest LNG plant. But what we rely on are things like, we're in BC, so very different than Alberta in terms of the regulatory environment. But we have just, we use renewable energy and electrification as part of our solution. And the lights just went out. I'm talking about electricity. Exactly. Well, okay. We're running out of electricity earlier than I thought.
No energy shortage.
No energy shortage. But yeah, so we have some significant expansion plans too. So we've taken an investment decision on the phase 1 of our project, but we have phase 2 on the way, where we want to, increase our output of LNG, but that's going to require a significant investment. So we're looking at, got a new novel technology that we're bringing in. It's got a fancy name. It's called LMS 100. I think, you got to come up with a cool name. But also, we're saying, so even within that context, cleanest in the world, we're still butting up against the BC climate promise and some of the GHG emissions that BC has in plan. So we have to do better than being the best if we want to expand, which we do. And so, there's a lot of things that have to be true more broadly in our system to be able to make sure that we're able to do that. So we're willing to do it, and we need partners in it. And so some of these projects, like in BC, we work with BC Hydro, some of their expansion plans. So you talk about, just the level of requirement of energy that we need to, our site would require about a gig itself to do all the, with all the plans that we have. So I think, there's a lot here to build upon. We just need to kind of connect the dots between the folks that have these innovative opportunities within the context of their businesses, and then the ones that, are also on our side are the kind of customers of that. I think about digital technology, maybe taking a little bit of it aside from decarbonization and saying what else is possible and what other things can we do in the context of using digital technologies. and actually I was talking to someone earlier about safety. There we go. And safety in the oil and gas sense, and some of the things that are, innovative opportunities to actually look at, solutions. So we're doing argonless backing welding in some of our applications that can materially change some of the fatalities that we've seen in terms of confined space and things like that. So there's applications that I think in terms of looking at this more broadly that will make an incredible difference to the lives and livelihoods of people.
If you want to go, I go.
I want to ask follow-up questions, but why don't you go? I want to know what the LMS 100 is.
Keep that.
It's a turbine. It's
So I talked about batteries and hybrid power at the rig sites, and I'm just going to elaborate a little bit more on what these things are. And so typically a drilling rig would use around 4.5 megawatts of power in any good given day. So that's how much power we generate in a day. It's around 4,500, 5,000 liters of fuel, of diesel every day. So we went from using diesel which is your worst offender in the GHG space, to moving to biofuel, which is mixing natural gas or LNG with diesel, to moving to pure LNG, and then to electrification. So we've got rigs today spread across different fuel types all the way to electrification. Why do we need the batteries? Batteries are exactly what you would say in a hybrid car is when you accelerate your car, the engine takes over. When you decelerate your car, the batteries take over and use nice, smooth energy or power. Each of these battery packs that we get are about a 40-foot container. So they're quite massive. It's quite a long truck. It houses 1.5 megawatts of power within that battery. It's controlled digitally. In other words, when the battery sees a demand, a peak or a low demand, it starts up or shuts down based on what the demand is for that battery. So if it sees that the generators are struggling to provide peak power, then the battery would kick in and power it up and give you additional power. Similarly, on an idle side, when the power is low, it would switch off a generator and actually just use battery power over a period of time. We cycle these batteries from 80 or 100%, similar to our phones, bring it down to 20%, charge it back up. All of this is done digitally, automatically, no human interface required. Safety of these batteries, lithium is not an easy chemical to play with. So we take these batteries out to a rig site. You got to make sure that we place them in the appropriate place. Typically, generators are situated as close to fuel tanks as possible, diesel tanks as possible. You don't want to put these batteries out there. So there's a lot that happens in this space, and there's a lot of investment needed in restructuring, if you like, the rig ecosystem to put these batteries in place. Going back to a little bit of electrification, you can use batteries with electrification. And I don't know if it was you, Janet, or somebody mentioned, we get charged for peak loads. So you get charged when you're at peak loads of power. Our rigs use peak loads of power when they're pulling pipe out of the hole every 3 minutes. So we get charged a hell of a lot or the operator gets charged a hell of a lot when you are plugged in to electrification. What the battery does for you is it cuts off and takes away all that peak power and runs it off the battery. So you have a nice, smooth transition or power transition that doesn't get charged. So you reduce your power cost significantly. You reduce your browning out of the grid if you're in a place where the grid's providing power to a small village and your lights start to brown out if you've got a rig close to it, especially in BC. So the battery does has a whole bunch of advantages, if you like, in how it manages diesel, biofuels, automated engine startup and shutdown, all the way up to electrification, right? I'm not going to touch on carbon sequestration and monitoring. I could spend all day talking about it. It's a really nice project that we're working on. Feel free to touch base with us and we'll show you what we've got. But every time, that's how I know CRIN. Every time we do something, we come to you guys and say, hey, we've got this. But I think we've got some really good, interesting projects in this space from a technology perspective, right?
Yeah, and I want more follow-up questions, but to stay on focus, of the 30 technologies in a variety of stages of commercialization, I guess, the latest stage technology we've generated, which is the methane emissions technology, which was actually a young engineer from Shaw and a young engineer from TC Energy, who were looking at very difficult to pinpoint fugitive emissions from a variety of sources, and asked each other the question of, why do you do it that way? Why do you do it that way? And came out with an underutilized bandwidth that can send a small data signal across 20 kilometers called low-row WAN. Built a $500 box that could pinpoint methane emissions down to a centimeter. They've done their commercial pilot with TC at their Crossfield site and are moving towards their demo. TC will be taking a sizable investment in it, and they have a contract for 210,000 units to be deployed that saves TC $60 million a year in their first year of operation. One of the funner ones, actually, is Kent and Raji still here? I know they were working earlier. Taking CO2 capture to brew sites. They've figured out a way to modularize an amine-based CO2 capture facility and put it on CO2 or a brewery essentially, and be able to reuse the CO2. And they've got their pilot with Cold Garden on the way. Cold Garden will soon be the official beer sponsor of the ETC. Green Box, which we've got one of the teams back there is modifying personal protective equipment using dispersion modeling software for methane detection to use individuals to detect methane. I don't know if you want to comment on an update on that, Tyler, if you're waiting. One of the ones I'm super excited about that are a little bit further out. One of them is a third generation carbon capture catalyst that changes the energy intensity of CO2 compression. And they have a pilot agreement through this boat signed. So basically targeting small point source emissions of CO2. So right now, only carbon capture in facilities generally above 1,000 tons a day are economic. One of the technologies that's just finished their lab scale test has found a specific microbe that can anaerobically digest non-food grade biomass in subsurface conditions and use the geothermal heat of the subsurface to turn shallow abandoned gas wells into RNG bioreactors. I can keep going on, but there's lots of cool stuff coming. But the point that I'm kind of trying to get at is the skill sets that were required for each of those individuals to come off, and they were not dissimilar to individuals like yourselves. Young professionals, emerging leaders working inside oil and gas who were given the chance to think about things in new ways and try something in the safety of a sandbox. So if it went sideways, well, they got a great leadership development experience and nothing really blew up. And then how can we get it through a faster stage gated technology development process using the horsepower of the companies that we work at? But the skill sets that were really required weren't necessarily the technical skills, as Pat and Cheryl were talking about. They were adaptability, resilience, coachability. These are the skill sets that the good news is you're not necessarily born with them or you don't have them. You can generate practices and procedures to cultivate those practices throughout your career so that you become more and more valuable. And that as the pace of technology increases and changes, you are so much more capable of implementing it into whatever position that you're in. I keep saying I don't know if software coding is where we need to be. I think AI is probably going to do it better than us anyway. How can we think about having the adaptability and the resilience to solve those?
Perfect. Well, that kind of perfectly transitions into my next question, which was kind of looking at how at your companies you're repurposing your existing resources or personnel to meet these demands of the decarbonization or the energy transition within your organization. So we've talked about hybridizing our drilling rigs, kind of looking at what your workforce is doing. And I think the key one we're looking to highlight here is building off of the presentation we had today of how your workforce or your personnel don't have to go back and get re-educated. They're getting these skills and they can transition directly or doing small kind of professional development with something like Avatar. How is that filling into your guys' strategic development and personnel training and transition?
So I wish I knew you before this. I would have hired all your people and we'd have done with it. And, So look, if you asked me 20 years ago if I, oil and gas, would be doing sustainability projects, and I would have said no, absolutely not. I had to upskill myself to go from where I was in my technical drilling engineering space to now what I do. We were forced to form a group within the company that took care of sustainability. We didn't go out and we went out of the marketplace. We went out to UFA, UFC and said, hey, what have you got for sustainability, guys? And we picked up a couple of those. Great guys. But you're young. We looked at what we had within the organization. We took our engineers who were chemical engineers and started to play in the space of, so in the battery space with lithium, we're also playing with sodium fuel cells and fuel cells in the nature of different chemicals that will actually generate more power. So we took these chemical engineers from within the company and transformed them into a sustainability group of engineers, if they like. Now, did they like that move? Did they see? I think the commitment that the company made with the investment that we were making then shows the employee, hey, this is here to stay. This is not a ad hoc science project that's going to go away in the next 2 years and be done with it. I think the change for what we want to do within the organization for people, upskilling people, and I'll come to training in a second, needs to come from the top of the organization. We can't have people within the organization and move them and say, hey, can you do this for 2 years and move them out? I've seen drilling engineers within my team who are now sustainability analysts who look at all the data and have now transformed themselves into bringing out real-time GHG emissions and building all these dashboards that the operators have. From a training perspective, we reached out to UFC, UFA, and maybe we should have reached out to you to find training programs for how do we migrate people or train people from one faculty of engineering to another. And you're absolutely right in what you put up. You don't need to re-educate yourself. It didn't come difficult for me. If you're an engineer and you have the basic knowledge, it's not difficult to adapt to what you're trying to do in this space. None of this is, mechanical engineering and combustible engines are going to be a thing of the past. What are you going to do after that goes away? You've got to move on to the next big thing. And so I think as a company, and I'd say this today, we are always looking for young people within this sustainability space. And so if you've got something that you've been educated, trained on, I wouldn't feel shy to go out to there is nothing that you can go train on or learn or graduate in other than a thesis or a PhD. The guys we hired today were normal chemical engineers who then transformed themselves into sustainability. So you're not going to find that anytime soon, that education or that bachelor's in sustainable or greenhouse gas energy or whatever it might be called in the future. You're going to have to find that within yourselves to come up with it. And look, I think companies in Canada, more so in Canada than the USA, are investing time. We take interns on. We took 7 interns on in this green space or evergreen space that we have within the company. And so we're always looking for new people. We're always looking for people to come and work with us and join us. I'll probably reach out for post questions to you. 10 a.m. tomorrow, free of charge, I'd assume. No, but look, I think the future is big. The future is better in the engineering space or even in the non-engineering space. I think there's tons of little jobs. We put on a battery and we put on, we started doing carbon emissions monitoring. Before we knew it, we were 40 people in the team. That's how fast it grew. We had electrical guys taking care of the batteries. We had installation guys doing stuff at the rigs. We had monitoring guys setting up sensors and IoTs and computers to bring all that data back in. We have analysts within the team who are now taking the data and analyzing it. So it grows. We're always going to be on the lookout for people. And as this space grows even more for us, it's going to be tremendously good to actually look into it and figure out what a rig contractor does in this green space, if you like.
Yes. No, I completely agree with everything that has been said previously, because this is when we talk about reskilling or looking at things differently, it's an and. Like it's not a divergent from, it's building upon the expertise that you bring already. And so I think there's, in LNG, we're creating a new industry in Canada. We don't actually, other parts of the world do this. Canada hasn't really invested a lot in LNG in the past. So we actually have to build people who maybe come from a whole different backgrounds. And we're hiring hundreds of people this year. So, we are looking for, I love that universal attribute kind of sign back there, because that's truly what we're looking for, is people who have adaptive leadership capabilities, people who think about problems differently and can actually, look at challenges in a different way. I love engineers. I work with a lot of them. I'm not one. But one of the things we've also done is looked at over and above, some of these, micro-skilling and upskilling kind of opportunities with, I would say, just, tweaks around the edges, is bringing cross-functional teams together. Not only so from different disciplines, but also from different perspectives. So the diversity of our team, we have a phenomenal diverse team from people, we benefit from having people from all over the world on our project. And we really, you cannot underestimate the way that a diverse team looks at things differently and provides that innovation spark. So something that somebody, from a completely different discipline can say about, hey, might seem like a silly idea at the time or a silly thought, but, engineering team, did you think about this, or why is that? And taking a step back and going, yeah, that's, what, and maybe we need to think about how we attack this problem. So I would say, in service of looking at what's next, as long as you have that learner mindset, you don't operate kind of from a fixed mindset. You're always looking at being curious, understanding issues, understanding the problem you're trying to solve. You might think it's A, it's actually B when you investigate further and get to the root cause of the problem. So being, remaining really curious about what that could be. And tapping into, that's why this is so phenomenal, and why some of these concepts are so great. You take people from Shaw and TC Energy and you put them together and they make magic, right? So I think there's some special opportunities there.
The idea that everything stays the same is just it's a falsehood. It's an illusion. And sometimes I think we cling to a certain set of beliefs or a certain set of ideals or even a certain set of facts. And, industries do that. And then, they get passed over. And I think that's really where the oil and gas industry sometimes can find itself. I have had broad exposure in different roles to many, many different companies and aspects of the energy system and its value chain. It's incredibly challenging to keep learning. And I met a few people in the room before the talk who are in that process of, change and learning. And it's super hard. Like, I think, pardon me, I'll even tell Candace was saying, look, I was working full time and doing my MBA and, having a family and doing these things. So don't beat yourself up if it feels like it's really hard, because it is super hard. And you have to keep your eye on where things are going. Sometimes you're going to feel like a complete idiot, like you don't know what's going on. I feel like that at least once a day. And I try to scare myself, whether purposely or not, every about 5 years by just completely changing industries or changing sectors. And figuring out, like, I was chief of staff to Minister of Natural Resources, and I was trying to figure out the nuclear industry and nuclear isotopes and shutting down the Chalk River reactor. It was cool, but it was really scary that they were entrusting us to make those decisions. So I think, my advice to people is just, really follow your curiosity. And reskilling, you're going to, if you follow that, don't challenge yourself at times. If you feel like you're getting too comfortable, shake it up. Go talk to Kevin. That'll do it.
Yeah.
I think I've had those conversations with you, Janet, where you scared me too. So look at where I am now. Maybe 3 points that I think builds upon a lot of, or 2 points, and then the builds, and then one that I think maybe clarifies. Education is a lifelong journey. don't even think about it as an education, whether it's micro-credentialing, whether it's showing up for things like this, whether it's getting involved in organizations like CRIN or the Young Professional Associations. Always have this childlike curiosity of being able to play with your edges. You know, I say it all the time is, you know, strong opinions held loosely. That's where the sweet spot is. You know, the second piece I would say is sometimes it's like riding a bike. You know, these skills we're talking about of entrepreneurship, of adaptability, of resilience, it's kind of like riding a bike. You're probably going to fall off your first time, but eventually you'll get it. You can read as many manuals as you want on riding a bike, and you'll never figure it out until you just try it. So these opportunities that we're trying to bring forward are a good example. But the one I use that is, I think, my guiding light on a lot of this is actually figuring out what your purpose in your career is. And I don't mean this in some like esoteric manner. I think it's pretty simple. And I use it as a Venn diagram. Like your purpose, it's like if you take a Venn diagram of the things you're good at, put that in a circle. The things you enjoy doing, put that in another circle. And then your job as your third circle. Now, if that's a one circle, you're on something I wish you were on. But there's things that you're always going to do that you're good at that you frankly don't enjoy doing. Or there's things that you enjoy doing that you're actually not that good at. And then your job is not necessarily just your professional job. Each one of us have jobs with our families, with our friends, with our communities. And when you figure out what that shining light is, that will guide all of these decisions. And when you can connect that, you become unstoppable. And the future is pretty bright. So each one of us has a different one. And I think that the future of energy is perhaps the defining and towering challenge of our generation. So let's go have fun with it, guys. And the future is you guys. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that. I'd like to open the floor up for some audience questions now for our panel. Depending how fast we get through those, we'll determine how many we can do. We got about 5 to 10 minutes to do that. So any audience questions? Yep. I'll bring the mic back to you so we can all hear you. Yeah, it'll record better. We are recording, so.
So you kind of talked about supplementing with batteries for rigs to manage power volatility. I'm guessing kind of what is your guys' perspective of that on a larger scale, managing the volatility that exists, especially in the Alberta power market with these large facilities? I know for us, like we can switch to electric, and that's something that I analyze all the time, but there's so much volatility in the power market that it's often not worth the risk. So I was just kind of wondering perspective on that.
Here we go. So good question. I think about 2 months ago, we're talking to the same company that supplies us with the batteries. We're looking at microgrids, more so for the United States. I don't know if you heard, Texas had a big shutdown 3 years ago, and it was the grid that went down in winter. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build a collection of batteries. Now, these are not 1.5 megawatt batteries. These are huge amounts of batteries. It's a battery farm, essentially. And what we do is we power it up and then supply power when peak loads are up to shave off peak loads. That is happening today. The investment is huge. We went out and asked for a $90 million investment for 2 microgrids. You got to be a reputed company, not an oil and gas rig contractor, if you want to dabble in this space. But are there people doing that? Absolutely. Did we want to do it? We want to be a part of it. So if there's investors in the room, come talk to me. But we have that microgrid very much in mind, and that all this peak loading and peak shaving, ATCO and these guys don't really like, right? And they charge us for. So yes, it's very active, very much a project.
Yeah, I might just add that, I think the future is exactly that. We're going to be able to, we can't even imagine how we're going to use power. We're going to be able to use our cars as batteries, so you'll be able to manage that peak load when you're just come home from work, turn on the TV, turn on all the lights, and it won't be, the peak load at the grid. You'll be actually potentially using your car battery. So whether that's done on an industrial scale, microgrids, it's done down the street, it's done 400 kilometers away, or it's done in your own garage. The way that we're going to be using electricity in the future that's why the whole system has to change, which is why it's so hard.
Rick, any other questions? Yep.
Thank you so much for this panel. It's just so inspiring to have leaders such as all four of you to bring up some hope for recent graduate students like ourselves. I just have a question, especially in a typical workplace. I don't think it's just energy, all sorts of sectors, private, public, whatever. There's a spectrum of forward-looking leaders, enablers like yourselves, but some old school thinkers as well, whether that be middle managers, executive board members. Just wondering from your experience, do you have any anecdotes or some words of wisdom to share with us when we're stuck in a room with somebody who might not be so curious?
This might be a question best answered after a glass of wine, but I'll give it to Kevin to arrange that.
There's a framework I've used, and it's actually based on a British researcher that's done a whole bunch of values-based research. And as you look at some people like, oh God, this guy is a Luddite. Like, how am I ever dealing with this? But understanding that people approach situations and new situations through their values, and understanding what those values are can help you get to a better conversation. So the framework is prospectors, settlers, and pioneers. And this has been based on a whole bunch of research that, he was using to describe the UK political decision. But if you think about settlers, there's a certain group of people whose values are just, I want to sort of get to where I'm going, and I want to figure out the rules, and I want to comply, and then I'm happy. And then there's a group of prospectors that are like, okay, well, okay, these are the rules. How do I figure out how I can win? And then there's a third group who is like, which is very much where, I sometimes play is, okay, well, why are we even playing this game? What's over there? What's on that frontier? Those are the pioneers. And when pioneers talk to settlers, they can terrify them. And so I've had to learn in my leadership, when I'm talking about a third generation carbon capture catalyst, to some groups, they're just like, is this guy lost his mind? But if I'm talking to a group of like, hey, how can I get them to win? And so my point is that people have a different set of values, and understanding what those values are can allow you to relate to them based on a values perspective, as opposed to the people that are just like, oh, that's new, I don't really try. Now there are those people, but figure out what their values are, and then maybe you can have a little more productive of a conversation. And then don't go in with like, we're going to change the world talk when people are just like, hey, we just want to follow the rules.
He's also a neuroscientist. I don't know if Kevin mentioned that, but he is. He's actually a bona fide neuroscientist, which is why that was a really great answer. But I would maybe just, add that, I think people are really working harder to find that values fit in where they work. And, don't feel bad. It's not, if it's not a fit, look to find the fit. Just change your scenery and find the fit, because nothing will feel right until you do find that fit. It could be really interesting technical work or this or that, or whatever your specialty is. But, I have found for me, if I don't have that real fit with my leader and my team and the work I'm doing, then I'm not good at the work.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that to see, I like the Venn diagram kind of concept to sort of say, how did these things fit together? Because I think that's really powerful. When you're dealing with people in your broader company, I sometimes I'm HR, so we talk about skill and will a lot. Is it a skill issue? Is it a will issue? Right. And there's been some research that's been done that says about 20% of the population lacks the will. I'm out. This is moving at too fast of a pace. This is not something I'm heavily invested in, and I'm not, maybe don't have that natural curiosity. And then there is another about 20% that is around the skill. And I'm looking around at many of the faces here, and I would say the folks that grew up with a smartphone in your hand and have been on the journey of the technology, innovation, pace of change, probably have a competitive advantage over the people who, maybe I'll speak for myself, I started off with the BlackBerry, if that says anything. So, but like, I think you have to have that skill and the will kind of concept too. I heard a statement as we've never moved as fast as we are today, and we'll never move this slow again. So you've got, there is something in that, making sure that you have that curiosity and you're staying afoot. And I don't really have a spectacular answer for the skill and will group, but I think, maybe understanding which one you're dealing with. And then, if you're, so the will people, I don't know, but the skill and the other, folks, then you can understand from a values basis, how do you actually make it meaningful for them? And how do you actually, get them over the line?
We call it technology and the aging engineer, but that's okay. Look, the reason that is what it is. We absolutely let them know that. Get on with it or move out. But look, the reason you're asking this question, the reason you feel the way you feel is, where this is all. I don't know. We are in the middle of a disruption just now. The world is disrupted in a technology way that there's acceptors and there's deniers in all of the space. If it wasn't for the smartphone, there wouldn't be Uber. If it wasn't for the protein bars that you buy on the shelf and not have milk every day. So there's a lot of disruption going on in a lot of different spaces, right? You're in the middle of that. And so we pick and choose what we want to use in that disruption space and call it out. Now, there's only one group of people who are going to win in this disruption is where the disruption is going. Get on with it, take that pioneer piece and move on with it or be left behind. If it wasn't, for people who are using BlackBerry still, I'm not sure if they can call an Uber with it, but, it has changed the way we do things. And so another 5-7 years will dictate where this all falls in. And I think the winners are going to be where sustainability is, what we want to do with the change we want to see. Technology is not gone away. We use it every day. We change things every day. And so get on with it is what I tell my older team. Either learn or we're going to have a younger guy replace you. Not to be so brutal to HR. Yeah. Look, there's no lie in this whole thing. If you're not going to use the technology you have, I have a family member who still uses I don't know what you even call those phones anymore, the ones you flip and dial with, a flip phone. And I'm, exactly. And that's exactly my reaction. They don't care, but they don't use any of this. And they're so far behind in daily news. And so they don't even have a newspaper anymore because they don't read anything anymore. So look, it's all relative. It'll fall in place in 5 years. If you're in a managerial position, tell them what I said. Not HR.
Yeah. Ooh, then they come to my office and then it's, there's a lineup.
Yeah, I was going to do one last question. So if Katie wants to take it, is there anyone else? Okay, we'll do the one in the back there, and then we'll close off the panel session here right after this.
Thanks. I just got a real quick question. Does new energy compete for capital? For example, I'm a shareholder, KEC is been lagging for sure. If you drill wells, you got 80, 100% in the Montney and Duvernay. I understand Pat Carlson's vision on everything. It's just, I look at solar and wind projects, even the ITC, PTC in the US, I'm getting 5-7% IRR. And that's with leverage, with interest rate where it is right now. It just doesn't make sense for a lot of these projects, I think, for new energy without government support. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on economics. Thanks.
It sounds like you've been in our investor meetings. Yes. No, you just hit the nail on the head. I think, there's, as we have seen, certainly the uptick in energy prices as a result of some of the geopolitical issues in particular, and I think that's going to just continue to go myself, and as we were talking about, nobody's drilling new wells really, except for KC. So we're in growth mode, whereas a lot of our peers are not. We were talking about, Ashley and I were talking before this about a lot of oil and gas companies right now are focused on returning that free cash flow to shareholders in the form of dividends and share buybacks and not investing. They're not cleaning up their mess in terms of ARO. They're not cleaning up their mess in terms of carbon emissions. So I think that, long term, that is going to catch up with them, and that companies that are more focused on the future will be the profitable, will be seeking out the new space in the marketplace. And, it is for short-term investors to see the difference between, we've got great wells. If we are deciding to direct cash flow to the green energy projects, and we're having those discussions internally right now, is how to optimize that math so we can, ideally get the most ownership. And we are looking long-term about how we can have really good well results, really good production, hit our targets, but we can also have maximum ownership of those utility projects come 2025, 2027, 2030, so that we are ready for when we do get more pressure on carbon prices to $170, $200, whatever dollars a ton. And we do believe that we are very well positioned for what the government is doing on CCS, investment tax credits, looking at the recently announced solar tax credit. But, that you just hit the nail on the head. We've got to make the energy transition investable, fundamentally, not just from retail folks like you, but, part of our challenge also at KEC is that we're 68% or so owned by ARC Financial, which doesn't leave a lot of liquidity. So you got to, find an investor strategy, which is, something I only dabble in, but is an area for people out there who have finance skills and you want to move into the energy transition. There is a huge amount of opportunity for you to start to be able to solve some of these problems, because we hear all the time about Goldman Sachs, getting in trouble with the SEC because they haven't really done their due diligence and put the detail behind their ESG strategy. But we have got to start to see that capital moving. And that is what I think the United States government, the US government has cracked with their IRA. And we need to crack that in Canada. We got to get the capital flowing. If we don't, we just simply won't meet our climate targets. And even more dire and pressing, I think, is that every day that goes by, we're just emitting more emissions into the environment that we're going to have to somehow find a way to get back in the future. And frankly, those of us sitting up here are maybe, looking at your generation thinking that you're going to inherit these problems. So, starting to understand them and how that market works is absolutely key.
Any other closing comments from our panelists?
Either a KEC shareholder or beholden to an security exchange statement. What I will say is that at a high level, the first thing that is the markets are still pricing oil and gas at 3 max 4 times cash flow, meaning that the markets are assuming that these prices aren't going to last. So that is still a very, very high cost of capital. Second piece is it's not necessarily just the new energy stuff. It's actually technology stuff that investors are sort of retreating to safety as you see increasing geopolitical uncertainty, recessionary fears, sort of, et cetera. So there's almost like it's not just a new energy, it's a technology, whereas used to be all these investments were predicated on the expectation of future cash flow. Now these investors are sort of retreating to safety, if you will. My view is that there's not an immediate quick alternative to oil and gas, as I think we all know. And so to Janet's point, how can we use in government investments like the IRA that are positive incentives to get us to invest the frankly near absurd amount of cash flow some of these companies are going to be generating here in a carbon constrained future, to invest in these technologies like third generation carbon capture technologies that can fundamentally change the cost curve. Stay tuned until tomorrow morning.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panel so much. So a round of applause. I think there was some very informative talking points there, and we'll welcome everyone to stay after we're done here tonight to network and come talk to some of our speakers. But first, I did want to hand the mic over to Jody with some closing comments.
Thank you, Josh. So yeah, first of all, so much thanks to Josh for moderating this panel. Great job, Josh. And huge thanks to our amazing panelists. So Janet, Ashley, Kevin, and Candace. One more round of applause for them. Thank you so much. So in lieu of speaker gifts, we have donated in your name to the Own Cancer campaign. It is Giving Day, so if anyone else feels called to do the same, remember this was a free event, put your money somewhere, good. So that's a great option for you. So my name's Jody Scott. I'm the Executive Director of the World Petroleum Council Canada Future Leaders. And in my day job, I'm a talent and career specialist at SAIT. So this conversation today on growing your career in the new energy future, really, there's a lot of key takeaways for me on the growing your career piece in particular. A few maybe I'd share with the crowd here. There are universal attributes, there's soft skills, those enabling skills, those essential skills, whatever you want to call them. We all have them. They're hard to identify, but that's what's really going to make that pivot into that new energy future possible. WPC on a global level, they do a youth survey every 3 years. And the last one was in 2021. And they announced the results of that in Kazakhstan for the youth forum that I was at in September. And part of that was that 80% of young professionals that filled out the survey didn't believe that their job was still going to exist in 20 years. The reality is that's probably true. Jobs that these people are in, they're going to change. They may not even exist yet, the future roles that they're going to be in. So new roles will exist. For example, we look at the role that you said you just hired for the first time is someone that's looking at greenhouse gas emissions and the specialist in that role. So industry is really going to continue to focus on upskilling people and taking those transferable skills, those essential skills, and moving them into those roles that are going to make up that new energy future. So I think this was a great discussion and a great launching off point to continue talking about these things. So thank you again, everyone, for that great conversation. So as for tonight, what's next? Well, there's still time to network and participate in our interactive session. There's definitely a lot of food left. There's lots of drinks left, so please help yourselves. We also have the Careers in Energy virtual reality experience over here on the left between the SPE and the Young Pipeliners Association of Canada stickers. So please check that out. There's also 3 CRIN posters that you can find to further explore the work that Cheryl and Pat have been working on. And like I said, there's appetizers from Fork and Farm and drinks provided by Creative Links. So please enjoy those as well. And just maybe a few plugs on what's coming up down the pipeline. So please watch out for the final events for the rest of the year. The YP Links Holiday Mixer is going to be at Greta on December 6th. Tickets are just $15 and you can register online to attend that. Avatar Ignite launches tomorrow here at the ETC from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. You can see RSVP through Kevin or Lindsay. The YWE Awards are in full swing for nominations. If you know a deserving woman in Alberta's energy sector, consider nominating them for a YWE Award. You can see Katie for more details on that. And lastly, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. If you're interested in volunteering for any of the young professional groups that have been here and present tonight, please reach out to Katie, Josh, or myself, and we're happy to direct you to the group that you're most interested in. Finally, another thank you to our sponsors for the evening. So Pat and Cheryl from Talent Needs for an Evolving Energy Ecosystem, thank you. The Government of Alberta and Government of Canada for supporting Pat and Cheryl's work. Pat's company, Creative Links, for supplying the drinks tonight. Thank you so much. And a big thank you to Innovate Calgary and the Energy Transition Center for the venue. CRIN for the support of the YP Link through the YP Sector Engagement Plan. Thank you, Avatar. As always, thanks for your support. And lastly, but not least, Jared, our photographer. Thanks for being here tonight. I think my only last note is please, on your way out, leave your name tags at the bucket at the door on your way out. But yeah, looking forward to connecting with everyone for the rest of the evening, and please make sure you get home safe. So thank you and good night.